How dare you? You fucking bitch ass nigga! You should run now! Yo, I can't wait till I see your sister. We gonna fuck her up. Fuck that bitch. And you hoe. And your mother.
On March 15, 2024, a tragic scene unfolds on the corner of 4th Avenue and St. Mark's Place in Brooklyn, New York. 19-year-old Samia Spain will never make it home again. She had spent the night with her twin sister Sonia and their friends, just enjoying a late-night snack at their favorite deli. But what started as a simple evening would end in shock. Samia's life was stolen from her, taken in an instant. The reason? Because she refused to give a man her phone number. What drives someone to take a life over something as small as a phone number? It's a question that we'll try to answer, but the truth behind this senseless act will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about violence, entitlement, and control. Tonight, we learn about how one man's anger and entitlement led to a death that could have been avoided, but for a moment of rejection. What was behind the emotions that led to this? What made it go so far? Let's find out. Sania and Sanya Spain, two inseparable sisters, bonded not only by blood but by a shared dream of a future filled with possibilities. They had always been close, not just in years, but in spirit, their laughter and voices echoing in each other's lives every single day. Together, they were unstoppable. Their connection was something many admired, the kind of bond you don't see often, the kind that felt eternal. On this typical evening, they headed to their favorite local deli in Park Slope, a corner of Brooklyn they had known since childhood. It was familiar, it was comforting, the place they turned to when they wanted to relax, grab a bite, and just be. The Natural Plus Deli stood like a small beacon in the cold, its neon sign flickering in the quiet night air. Inside, the hum of the deli's fridge mixed with the soft chatter of their friend. The warmth of the place was a stark contrast to the cool, crisp evening outside. But the twins didn't mind. It was their spot, a small piece of home. The twins, surrounded by their friends, moved to the counter, laughing about something light-hearted. The night was still young, and everything seemed so ordinary. But it wouldn't stay that way for long. A group of men entered the deli, their presence louder than the usual late-night crowd. Among them was V.O. Kelly, a 20-year-old who had been drinking heavily. He seemed harmless at first, just another face in the crowd, but when he noticed the twins, something shifted. He made his way toward them, stepping into their space as if it was his right. At first, his approach seemed innocent enough. A few casual remarks, a smile. He tried to flirt with Samia and Sania, pressing them for their contact information. It was typical, maybe a bit forward, but harmless, or so they thought. But as soon as Samia and Sanya turned him down, politely but firmly, something changed in Kelly. The mood in the deli shifted. His demeanor wasn't so light anymore. His requests turned into demands, and his smile, once friendly, began to feel forced, like something darker was bubbling just below the surface. The twins' friends noticed the shift, and instinctively they stepped in to protect them. The group of men, including Kelly, was quickly pushed out of the store by the deli staff. The door slammed shut behind them, but the tension remained. It was far from over. As the twins finished their meal, trying to shake off the uncomfortable interaction, they had no idea that outside Kelly was waiting with anger in his chest and a knife in his hand. The twins, ever kind and polite, had simply turned down the advances of a stranger, but that was enough to set something off inside Kelly. The atmosphere in the deli shifted, the tension suddenly becoming thick, like something was about to happen. At first, Kelly seemed like he would let it go, but when the twins stood firm, refusing to share their contact information, his demeanor changed. His body language stiffened, and for a brief moment his eyes darkened. It wasn't a look anyone could ignore. The deli workers and the twins' friends, sensing the situation escalating, immediately stepped in. They pushed Kelly and his group of friends out of the store, locking the door behind them, a final act of control that brought temporary peace. The girls sat down, trying to shake off the awkwardness, thinking it was over, thinking they were safe. But outside, Kelly was waiting. He was no longer the man who had been joking and trying to flirt. The man outside was different. He was angry, his temper seething, and now he was armed. He wasn't just a guy who'd had a few too many drinks. He was a man who, for reasons no one could fully understand, felt entitled to something the twins had every right to refuse. As the twins and their friends finished their meal, oblivious to the storm that was about to break, Kelly stood in the shadows, watching, waiting. The chill in the air felt sharper now, as if the night itself knew what was coming. Without warning, Kelly lunged forward. The flash of steel in the dim light was all it took to change everything. In an instant, he slashed at Sanya, the blade cutting deep into her arm. The pain, the shock, she screamed, but it wasn't enough to stop him. Kelly's rage wasn't aimed at her alone. It was Samia who bore the brunt of the violence. The knife plunged deep into her chest, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The world around her went still as she crumpled to the ground. Her sister screamed her name, but there was nothing that could be done. The night had taken a devastating turn, and Samia, once full of life and laughter, lay still in the cold night air. Sanya, her arm bleeding, stood frozen in disbelief, watching as the love of her life, her twin, her other half, was taken away in an instant. It was too late. Too late to save Samia. Too late for anyone to intervene. As Samia lay there, her life slipping away, Sanya was left to face the horror, to watch her sister slowly lose the battle for life. Would she survive this nightmare, this moment that would haunt her for the rest of her life? Could she ever heal from the sight of her twin, her closest confidant, dying in front of her? The world outside carried on, unaware, indifferent. But for Sanya and for the family that would never be the same again, the world would never feel right again. As the investigation continued, the manhunt for Veo Kelly began. Law enforcement scoured the city, desperate to find him. His name, his face, his past were all over the news. The tension built with each passing hour. Where was he? What was he planning? How far would he go to avoid facing the consequences of his actions? It was a race against time, with every second feeling like it could be the moment Kelly would strike again, or disappear for good. The clock was ticking, and yet he remained elusive. 5 days passed before Kelly finally surrendered. It wasn't the dramatic capture anyone expected. No standoff, no final chase. Instead, he walked into a police station and turned himself in. The man who had taken a life, the man whose violent outburst had shattered so many lives, was now in the custody of law enforcement. But as he stood before the officers, facing charges of murder, assault, and possession of a weapon, the real question hung in the air. What drove a man to murder over something as insignificant as a phone number? It wasn't just the crime that left people stunned. It was the sheer lack of any real reason, any justifiable motive. Rejection, of all things, had led to this. The death of a young woman whose future had been taken in a heartbeat. Was it truly that simple? As the police worked to build their case, one thing became clear. Samia's death was a tragedy with no simple answer. Veo Kelly, a 20-year-old Brooklyn native, had a criminal history long before that fateful night. His past was riddled with incidents that spoke to a pattern of violence, anger, and a deep sense of entitlement that colored his view of the world. From an early age, Kelly seemed to have difficulty handling frustration, rejection, or any form of challenge to his authority. His actions reflected a man who felt a sense of power over others, a power he believed was his by right, not by respect. What triggered his violent outburst that night? Was it the alcohol that had clouded his judgment, turning what could have been a harmless interaction into something tragic? Was it the sting of rejection, something so simple, yet enough to send him into a fit of rage? Or was there something deeper at play, something that had been festering inside him for much longer, waiting for the right moment to surface? As we explore Kelly's background, it becomes clear that his mentality was shaped by a complex combination of factors. His behavior wasn't a random act. It was the result of a mindset that centered on control. Kelly's actions raise uncomfortable questions about masculinity, entitlement, and the way some individuals feel entitled to demand something from others, whether it's attention, affection, or anything else. Was it the rejection that set him off? Or was it something more deeply ingrained in his view of the world and his place in it? Did he believe that Samia and Sanya owed him something because he asked for it? Did he feel humiliated by their refusal, as though they had taken away his power? Kelly's actions on that night in the deli were not an isolated incident. As we look deeper into his history, we see a trail of violent tendencies, small flashes of aggression that had only been waiting for the right spark. His behavior seemed to be a series of warning signs, one after another, that no one, not even he, saw coming. These warning signs all led to that tragic moment when a small act of defiance turned into a violent tragedy. It's not hard to see the connections between Kelly's past and what happened that night. His inability to process rejection, his need to control and dominate, these were the threads that led to a senseless loss of life. And as we reflect on the events, we're left with a haunting question. How many other lives could have been spared if only someone had recognized the signs earlier? The vigil outside the deli was a somber gathering filled with grief. Friends, neighbors, and family members of Samia, Spain came together, struggling to process the loss of a young life taken too soon. The night air was thick with emotion as candles flickered in the cold. Samia's father, Stephen Spain, stood at the front, his face a mix of disbelief and deep sorrow. His voice cracked as he asked, "How could you take her from me?" Those words, simple yet filled with so much pain, hung in the air. How could anyone take a life over something so small? How could they destroy a future, a family, a bond that was built over 19 years? Sonia, the surviving twin, stood nearby, her face a mask of anguish. The guilt weighed heavily on her. The loss of her sister, the person she had grown up with, shared her dreams with, and laughed with, was something she couldn't fully comprehend. Sanya struggled with what felt like an impossible burden, a constant reminder that her twin was gone and she had been helpless to save her. The world around her seemed to shatter in an instant. No one could prepare her for this. No one could prepare anyone for losing a sister like that. The community around them was shaken. The Natural Plus Deli, a place that had once been a source of comfort and familiarity for the twins, was now forever marked by tragedy. It was a spot that held countless memories, a place where everyone knew the twins by name. But now, for everyone who had shared moments with them there, it would never feel the same. The community couldn't understand how something like this could happen to someone they knew, someone they loved. The area was familiar, safe even, and yet the unthinkable had occurred. As people stood in disbelief, they reflected on the neighborhood they called home. The deli, once a central gathering place, now felt like a place tainted by violence. But there was more than just the physical space that had changed. The deeper question echoed in the minds of those who knew the twins. How did we get here? How did we allow something like this to happen? There was an undercurrent of danger that no one had fully addressed, a sense of growing tension that had been ignored for far too long. Young men in the area, many of whom had their own histories, had been raised with a sense of entitlement, believing that women owed them something simply because they asked for it. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and the community could feel it. It was a harsh reminder that for all the changes they had seen, some things remained the same. As the night wore on, it wasn't just the loss of Samia that haunted the community. It was the deeper question of why this continued to happen. How many other lives were impacted by this same sense of entitlement? How many people, especially women, had felt unsafe, unprotected, because of attitudes that were allowed to grow unchecked? The community was left with a feeling of unease, wondering what would change and what would stay the same. It was a painful reminder that the struggle for respect and equality wasn't just something people talked about. It was something that needed to be acted on before more lives were lost. As the case moved forward, Kelly was left to face the full consequences of his actions. The trial would not be quick. It would be long and difficult, a process that would test the strength of the community's faith in the justice system. For many, there was no question about his guilt. The evidence was clear. But the question that weighed heavily on the minds of everyone involved was simple. Could true justice be served for Samia? The community watched closely, hoping for a sense of closure, but also filled with uncertainty about what the outcome might be. The grief was still raw, the pain still fresh. They wanted answers, and more than anything, they wanted to see accountability for a life lost so senselessly. Would Kelly be held responsible for taking a life over something so trivial as a phone number? Would the legal system truly deliver justice for Samia? Or would it become another story of failed promises? As the trial progressed, the legal battle unfolded with tension. The prosecution was pushing for a full sentence. They were clear in their demands, making it known that Kelly's actions could not and should not go unpunished. His actions were not just a momentary lapse in judgment. They were the result of a pattern of violence, a dangerous sense of entitlement that had manifested in the most devastating of ways. Samia was gone, and her family, her community, needed to see that Kelly would be held accountable for what he had done. But Kelly's defense team had their own narrative to push. They scrambled to find an explanation for his behavior, trying to paint his actions as something other than deliberate. They fought to frame the situation as a momentary outburst, as if one small rejection could justify such violence. The arguments they presented were met with skepticism, and many in the courtroom felt the weight of their attempts to minimize the severity of Kelly's actions. How could they even try to explain away what had happened? What could possibly make sense of what he had done? Each day in court, the pressure mounted. Samia's family was there, sitting through the legal proceedings, knowing that no verdict could ever bring their daughter back. The community stood behind them, hoping for justice, but also struggling with the reality that no sentence would truly right the wrong. Kelly's trial was a painful reminder that some actions couldn't be undone, no matter how much time passed or how many legal battles were fought. What remained, after all the evidence was laid out and the arguments made, was the same gut-wrenching truth. A young woman was gone, and her family would never be whole again. The outcome of the trial seemed so simple to some. Kelly had killed Samia, and he needed to pay for it. But the courtroom drama played out in a way that forced everyone to confront harder questions. Was the justice system enough? Was it truly capable of delivering justice when the loss was so great, the pain so deep? And even if Kelly was convicted, would the community ever be able to move on from what had happened? As the trial came to a close, the question remained: what would be the final price for Samia's life? The answer would come soon, but for the family and the community, the weight was unbearable. One question remains: what makes a person cross the line between rejection and violence? What in a person's mind can turn something so small, so seemingly insignificant, into a reason to end someone's life? In this case, Kelly's anger, fueled by a simple refusal, led to an irreversible tragedy. But what role does toxic masculinity play in this? In a world where some men feel entitled to a woman's attention, where rejection can feel like an assault on their pride, how far will they go to reclaim that power? It's a question that doesn't have easy answers, but it's one that we must keep asking. The loss of Samia Spain is a stark reminder of the dangers women face every day. What happened that night was not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of the larger, more pervasive issues that many women navigate regularly: the threat of violence, the fear of rejection, and the constant need to protect themselves from those who feel entitled to their space, their time, and their bodies. Samia's life was taken for nothing more than a refusal, and in that moment, everything changed. Her family's world was shattered, and her community was left to pick up the pieces. This senseless act of violence has forever changed the lives of those who loved her, and for them, no amount of justice could ever bring her back. Now we turn to you. What do you think was going through Kelly's mind that night? What could possibly justify the violence he chose to inflict? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective on this heartbreaking case. If you want more true crime stories that dig into the heart of what drives these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Don't miss our next video, where we'll dive into another chilling case that leaves more questions than answers. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.